So when do you determine whether a modification of a loan or a short sale is appropriate? Well, the answer to that is you probably don't. That's really an issue that your seller should decide for themselves. Is there anybody here, by the way, that's doing loan mods? Anybody? Anybody? Okay. Again, probably one of those things nobody would admit to, even if it was true. If you are doing loan mods, you can come up and see me afterwards or give me a call, because it's a very, very tricky element of the law. But anyway, if you've got a seller who is coming to you and saying, look, I need to either modify my loan or sell short, you probably shouldn't be making the decision for them. But when, what kind of advice can you give them on that? Well, I gave a talk on this about 2 months ago, and we had the president of some mortgage broker association that showed up as well, and he had some stats that said of the people that are getting loan modifications, about 80% of them are back in default within 6 months, and I think 100% of them were back in default within like a year. So there's always that to consider. So I guess if you're offering some advice, or if your seller is looking for some advice, the advice would be, even if you get the loan modification, is that going to do you any good? Because if you're just going to wind up back in default several months later, you should either just dump the property in foreclosure or try for a short sale. So the next thing that's highlighted is, what is the lender offering? Debt relief or just a reconveyance? That is an issue that we've seen a lot. Does everybody know what I'm talking about there? Okay. I'll expound on it a little bit. The classic definition of a short sale is you go to the lender and you say, you're owed X, the property's not worth X, it's worth something less than X, and I can get you some money on it. I can get you 80% of what you're owed, but you've got to agree to convey the property, or allow the property to be conveyed, and you've got to release the seller of any obligations under the loan. And that used to be kind of the way it went. If the seller, or if the bank agreed to the short sale, they would sign, or do a reconveyance of their loan and release the seller of any further obligations. And it was just sort of assumed that that's the way that the law worked, and that if the seller agreed to all of this, that there would be no further action that the seller could take. That the lender could take against the seller. In other words, for a deficiency. What the lenders are doing now, as I'm sure many of you are aware. First, well, let me stop for a second. Are short sales an issue for you guys up here? Okay, they are. All right, then I'll continue with this, because they're just rampant in San Diego. Everybody owes more than their house is worth in San Diego. I don't care when you buy it. I don't care if you bought it 20 years ago. Yeah. Everybody's like borrowed against their house and so on and so forth. So anyway, what the lenders are doing now is they are offering, as I'm sure you've seen, they're saying, yeah, we'll accept the terms of the deal. In other words, we'll accept the money and we'll issue a reconveyance of our note, but we're not going to release the seller from any obligations under the note. So in other words, we'll let the property pass to the new buyer, but we're going to think about whether or not we want to come after the seller for the deficiency. So $1 million loan, for example, you can only get $750,000 for the property. Bank wants to stay on the issue of whether or not they want to sue the seller for the deficiency. Classically, there were several things that everybody just kind of figured would protect the seller, one being the anti-deficiency statutes in California, and the other being the one action rule in California. Everybody know what the anti-deficiency statutes are? No. Anybody not? Okay. Anti-deficiency statute in California, it's a law. It's on the books in the civil code. What it means is that when you are a lender and you make somebody a loan to purchase a property, a purchase money loan, and that money is used to purchase a single-family residence that the seller intends to and does occupy as their primary residence. The only thing that you can do is you can foreclose on that note if the owner stops making the payment. And if you foreclose and you get something less than you are owed, you cannot come after the seller for a deficiency. So buyer buys a house for $1 million, becomes the owner, has to sell it for, or I'm sorry, stops paying, lender forecloses. When all is said and done, lender only gets $800,000. They're done. They can't come after the seller for the $200,000 deficiency. It's called the anti-deficiency statute. The one action rule is something that goes kind of hand in hand with that, and again, it's a part of the civil code. And what that means is that a lender, anybody who takes back security for a purchase money note on a single family residence that the owner occupies, can only do one thing, and the only one thing that they can do is foreclose. And they can do it judicially or non-judicially, but they can only foreclose. In other words, they can't, which a lot of lenders would love to do now, say, we don't want the property, we'd like to just sue you personally. Can't do that. Because when you're a lender and the house has been devalued, maybe you don't want that house back as security. Maybe foreclosure isn't the best option for you. Maybe you would rather go and sue that person, get a judgment against them, and start taking a chunk of their monthly payment for the next 20 years. Not an option under the one action rule. So why is this an issue now? How are lenders getting around this now? Well, real simple with the anti-deficiency statute. The anti-deficiency statute says when you foreclose, you're done. Okay, well, if you don't foreclose, the one action rule doesn't really, the anti-deficiency rule doesn't really apply by the terms of the law. So the lenders are saying, hey, we never foreclosed on any of these notes. We, issued some sort of a little deal on the side with the seller. So really, we think we still have the opportunity to go after the seller for the deficiencies. The one action rule, how are they getting around that? They're saying, well, it doesn't really apply anymore because we renegotiated this obligation. We gave up certain things like, the ability to non-judicially foreclose. So we think that when we renegotiated that the one action rule went off the table. And we think now we have the right to be able to go after these sellers and collect deficiencies. So it's something, now is this going to work? I don't know. The only way to know for certain is when a bank actually sues one of these former owners and the two duke it out, and you go to the judge and the seller says, hey, I've got these two protections, this shouldn't be allowed to happen, and the judge is either going to say, well, yes it is, or they'll say, no, I agree with you. So unfortunately there's no real clear answer that you can give to your sellers right now, except the following. And this is kind of important because there's a fairly large institutional broker that got sued for this kind of recently, and that they told their seller, go ahead and take the short sale offer, there's nothing the lender can do to you, because the lender refused to sign a statement saying we're releasing the seller of all obligations under the note. Several months ago, actually about 2 years ago, we first started seeing the initial stages of this, and it was lenders that were sneaking new notes under the noses of the sellers. And they were saying, oh, okay, hey, your short sale's been approved, sign here. And people were just sort of signing on the dotted line, not realizing that one of the things they were signing was a new promissory note obligating them for the deficiency. So that was a fairly easy one to spot. So they stopped doing that, and now they're just issuing their acceptances of the short sale saying we reserve all rights at Law and Equity to come after you for a deficiency. And they're not saying we have any rights, they're just saying, hey, if we do have any, we're reserving them and we're going to give it a shot. So when you are taking a listing for a seller that's in a short sale situation, first of all, don't tell them that you're absolutely positively going to get released from all obligations under the loan, because odds are they're not. And when you write offers, when you accept offers, when you're doing your advertising in the MLS, make sure that there's something in there that says that the seller's acceptance of the short sale offer is contingent upon the lender agreeing to release the seller from all obligations under the note. Now it does say, and I think the PAA or whatever it is, that's the SSA, exactly. The SSA, I believe, does say that the acceptance is contingent on the seller's lender accepting the short sale offer. And where we're finding problems with that is that the lenders are coming back and saying, yes, we've accepted it, but we're not going to release our